and I think we can be the answer to a number of global challenges, both climate and microplastics, and a couple of others.
Thanks, Lena. So I pick up on the issue you've raised there, that we need more and more out of the same raw materials, first of all. They're going to be push and pull factors, we all know, for the industry. You brought up the issue of microplastics, that you see on the same level as a terms of challenge, actually as climate change.
Yes. Why is that? Of course, it's a disgusting thought when you think about these small microplastic corns that spread in the water system. You find it in Wales, you find it in, you have dead whales on the German coast, the Norwegian coast. When the veterinarians look into why they're full of plastic, bigger sheets, but also these small, and they are slightly static, so you cannot just check them off. You have to brush them off, and when it comes into your intestines, your stomach, and so on, without going into details, it is not. No, it's not good. To be short. So I think, and when it comes to climate, we have technologies, we have financing, we have international agreements, we have national strategies on different levels. But on microplastics, there's nothing so far.
That's to you.
It's for you, Lena. And Martin, you can pick up on
Okay, I'll answer that.
Don't worry. I know you'll want to talk about that too. So where do you see the gaps? Where do you see the areas for improvement?
I think mostly it's a knowledge gap, actually. I do not want a European forestry policy. There is a European forestry strategy for summing up all the bits and pieces where forestry is mentioned and where it affects the sector. And we have to be very aware of what's in it, and now it's being rewritten, so we have a lot of work to put in here. But basically, there is very little knowledge on how modern, sustainable forestry is run. For us in Södra, south of Sweden, we are cooperative. We have 50,000 family farms. We have 3 major biorefineries and 9 sawmills and so on, and roughly 5,600 employees. So it's big. But still, when we are out in the forestry, what we do is micromanagement with the green forestry plans that we have. I mean, for every part that is decided on how to manage and what you need to do, it's a diameter of 150, 200 meters. Because of how the forest looks and where the water is and everything. And this is managed with green forestry plans. We now have them as apps in our iPhones. And when the Apple CEO was in Sweden for 8 hours, he looked into four technologies. 2 of them were from Södra. One was our green forestry plan, and how we manage this with farmers and modern technology. But that's a condition to be able to be so precise when it comes to effectiveness in production, but also effectiveness in sustainability. And the other one was virtual reality in our house building company, how you could build a house and move in the house and see how you would, if you want to have a bigger bedroom or sort of. Very interesting for young and old people.
So in a nutshell, picking up on the points you've made, you see the primary challenges bridging that knowledge gap.
I think so, and when we can explain what we are doing and how the real revolution in Swedish and European forestry the last 10-15 years, I think we have, and also in the industry when it comes to sustainability, I think we have there is a huge knowledge gap.
Okay, picking up on that, Martin. Again, if you could also bring us perhaps examples you have of where innovation has been captured to bring value. And I'll also ask you to pick up on what I asked Lena as well about where you see the EU policy jigsaw fitting together. And do you agree with Lena's idea that the primary challenge is bridging that knowledge gap?
Thank you. Well, let me actually answer another question that you sort of wrestled with briefly on...
That's a good start.
Exactly. And then come to yours about decarbonisation. Obviously, at the European Climate Foundation, we are essentially focused on the climate challenge, although we also would agree with you actually on the question of plastics that you mentioned. You can't try and solve one at the expense of the other and vice versa. But we are targeting under the Paris Agreement, zero net emissions. So decarbonisation doesn't describe the objective that we have by mid-century, which is 30 odd years away from us now, of net zero emissions for this as well as almost every other industry. I mean, it's next to zero that we need, and beyond that, likely negative emissions. So the challenge from an innovation perspective is absolutely enormous. But to give you some examples, and then to go back to your central question, I've been looking at this for 3 or so years with the European Climate Foundation, and we were looking at industrial decarbonisation as we described it at the time, and in particular industries such as chemicals, steel and cement. And interestingly enough, it wasn't the pulp and paper industry that was first amongst our key concerns, and a tribute actually to work that CEPI and all of its members have done in thinking about and trying to advance ideas and approaches that will help solve that problem. But in that time, we've obviously been looking at other industries and seen where the combination of product innovation, process innovation, and business model innovation come together to best effect. And actually, outside of this industry, you can see examples in the power industry and certainly in the mobility or automotive industry, where the business model has been completely upended through a combination of push and pull factors, if you want, a carrot and stick. There are circumstances which have been promoted by public policy over many years to promote, for example, more renewables energy generation, which combined with digitisation, Industry 4.0, to upend the business model essentially in power generation. So it's now decentralised and much more likely to be renewables based than it was a mere 5 years ago. And to your point about how you capture sustainable value or long-lasting value in that, there have been a lot of losers, as well as a lot of winners. So the challenge for your industry in that process, which will affect your industry as much as others, is to be on the right side of that equation, of course. There are going to be industries and individual companies in any transformation process like this which will lose value. You have, as a set of industries and companies, the potential to be on the right side of this transformation. And the combination of the digitalisation coupled with the broader sustainability challenge, by which it's the net zero emissions and the circular economy challenge together, you have huge potential, I think, to advance that. And the specific example, I think, which is probably closest to your area that we've worked on recently is certainly plastics, where we can see that the value at the moment that is lost using fossil-based plastics in particular, from production through to ultimate waste disposal, is huge in terms of economic value and enormous in terms of the CO2 impact as well as a consequence. And the underlying reason of that is that we focus our attention on collection of final plastics, and only a small percentage of that is recycled. And as a consequence, we lose probably about 90% in our estimate of the total economic value and the emissions reduction potential from that. That can be solved partly through much greater recycling, but also through the bio-based economy, challenging and substituting for some of those materials as well.
Can I add on recycling of plastics? That means that you bring with you all the chemicals that were in the old product. It's not very good.
No, and one of the challenges as a consequence for policy is to have standards at the design stage, essentially, that ensure that there's a more viable way to disentangle, if you want, or have a smaller number of products, components, that you can take apart and then recycle if need be. But the alternative is much more, obviously, bio-based materials to compete with it in the first place.
So if I pick up on that, you're saying that you've got those examples that you put forward. We've heard about today from a keynote speaker, Linda Crawley. We've also heard from Sylvan, Secretary Director General, about this need to evolve business models. You give us examples where they've been truly upended with both winners and losers. But also the point that the industry is well placed to be a winner rather than a loser in this battle, of course. And I know you mentioned the interconnectivity of all of the issues. It's clear for all to see. But you mentioned that the challenge from the innovation perspective is enormous. So do you mean by that then it's a challenge that's going to be hard to meet?
it will be hard to meet, but I think the number of innovations that we can see at an early stage, technology innovations, is hugely impressive. For me, it gives me great optimism that this is a possible challenge to confront. The challenge from a European perspective is to pull those through to scale and commercially effectively. If there is something, at least from our work, and I think this will be found from others as well, that Europe does less well than China and the US, by way of example, it is the commercialization of those innovations. So we're good at the early stage, research and development, and we're less good at the industrialization and the market success of them, which brings us to the question of how policy should enable that latter stage better, whilst retaining, obviously, the early stage successes.
I have to add here that I know that not every one of you are aware of that. You are also a member of the Forestry Technology Platform, as CEPI is a member, but also some companies are standing members. What we do in FTP is to try to get enough room in the European research programs for our sector and for these innovations, and to get European grand scale programs up and running, and to inform you about what is happening on the research and the innovation area, and also to lobby the Commission to get enough space for forestry or sector innovation and research in the last 2 years of the Horizon 2020, but also when the negotiations now start on the next research program. So I think it's very important that you support the FTP, and we need more supporting companies. That was a sales pitch.
I think we noted that there, thank you. Now I'm going to move on now because our other two panelists are also itching to get in. Julie, I'm going to pass over to you. I know you're going to tell us a little bit, if I understand correctly, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about the European Spinning Group, about how it's taken innovation. We all talk about innovation, it's a big word, everybody, we know that. But how have you as a medium-sized company taken innovation and built it into your entire cycle of production and all the things that you do? And what lessons have you learned from that?
Okay, maybe just introduce European Spinning Group, because I'm here actually not from the paper industry, but the European Spinning Group is from the textile business. So we are a spinning company, so that means we transform fibers such as viscose fiber, also wood-based fibers, into yarn for weaving and knitting spinning mules. Why I'm here today, we're an SME, that means we have about 100 employees. We're Flanders, Belgium based, so I'm a local. And we have a turnover, just to tell, about 25 million euro. We produce yarns for the full textile business, so that means from interior fabrics to clothing textiles and more technical textiles. We're also a family business, and I'm here today also representing the third generation, because that also brings additional challenges, as some of you might know. So I was asked today to tell about innovation at the European Spinning Group. I think the first transformation, it's not only innovation, but it's a transformation we made that enables innovation in our company, is that we move basically from really being a product-driven company towards really being a solution company. I know it sounds catchy, but what that actually means is that we see that a lot of companies over the years have disappeared, that we have still good companies, textile businesses here, but sometimes they lack knowledge of where the product is going, where the technology is going. So what we are doing now is we are really working in kind of cluster approaches, working together with our customers, with the customers of our customers, which might seem easy, it's not always easy for traditional businesses. More and more working with suppliers in making new products, making new clusters, and developing new products as well. I think very good relationships also with technology companies, with machine builders. Because what we realized is that in family business or traditional sectors, that you can only innovate if you work on really working on that building blocks that help you through innovation. For us as a European Spinning Group, the first important building block is really investing in flexible production. Why? Because this way we can diversify our product portfolio, but also our markets, our business model or service model towards those companies needing small volumes, a broad area of products, which is a very important one. So we keep on investing in machinery to get there. Second point is investing in the network. This was, in fact, the first point I already mentioned, is investing in good relationships with suppliers, with customers of our customers, but more, and this is actually kind of a trend in the younger generation, bringing in external knowledge from knowledge centers, from research institutes, machine builders, from even startups that we are working with to really get this innovative knowledge. Because you cannot, in my point of view, you cannot do it by yourself, especially in a sector like the textile industry, where a lot of the production facilities have moved. We have had this kind of move from standard production towards the east, so we really need to select good partners in gaining that knowledge and then really bringing it into the next level. I think keeping this open approach has given us the opportunity to innovate in different sectors or in different markets. We have, with our management team, we have looked at the trends in the sector, because we all know that innovating just to innovate is not enough. As a company, you also need revenues, you have shareholders that have to be happy, also family businesses. So you need to bring innovation that also has a market for it, which is not always easy. So we defined with European Spinning Group 3 core market trends that we're following now, which is outdoor textiles. Second one is everything that has to do with safety, especially in Europe. Fire retardant textiles is a very, very large topic for us to think about how can we translate that in our production model. And a third case, which I wanted to tell you a little bit more about in this sustainability story, is we have a concrete example of how we as an SME also work on the circular economy business and in textiles. I think it's a good story because it also shows that this kind of purchasing-driven, market-driven approach is very important. So what we worked on during the past few years, there was a tender from the Dutch government, the Dutch army actually, who proposed a tender for towels and work clothes that had a certain percentage of recycled content in the fabrics. So we actually worked on this challenge together with the towel production company in Belgium, a normal customer of ours who wanted to look into the possibilities of circular economy. And we built up a story where we actually collected jeans. So this is not only a story of bringing new product to the market, but also a new business model in the sense of working together, not only with production company, customer and supplier, but also with people who are sorting the textiles, people who are doing testing on the textiles, and even the end brands who have to purchase this. So we developed a towel made of 40% of post-consumer recycled jeans, so all jeans that were collected, tested, and shredded again, made into new yarns and fabrics. This is only a small example. I know that we will not conquer the whole circular economy. I think this is why I think governments and companies should work together with technology companies in making this work. But I think it's a good small example of how, you know, decision of a government to start green purchases could work and transform the whole business model of this ecosystem in circular economy. So I think it's a good example. It's for us actually the start of a new product line being ESG Green, which we are working together also with different customers and end markets to develop this circular solution.
Thanks very much. It's interesting to hear a success story of how a medium-sized company is able to harness innovation and work together across the supply chain to make it valuable. Obviously, I think everyone would like to hear from your perspective. We heard from Sylvain earlier this idea of, you want to access the EU funding instruments that we hear a lot about. Okay, so you think, right, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to find out what's available to me, what funding opportunities are there to support me as a medium-sized company in creating innovation. And as Sylvain mentioned, you can find yourself sometimes reading pile paper. What's your experience with that as a medium-sized company? Have you been overwhelmed by the paper?
Well, there's definitely, first of all, you have to look at what institutions are available. I haven't found them all. We've been guided a little bit with the local authorities there. It's sometimes difficult to build a dossier to receive funding. To be honest, sometimes you're a company, you have an idea in your head and you want to move as fast as possible. You don't have the time for the full procedure, so I think the time to market also might be from time to time kind of a hinder there. And I think the third problem is that, we've moved from traditional business into new innovative company, but we've grown organically. We don't have a huge team, a huge innovation team as large companies might have to work on these dossiers, getting this funding or these dossiers ready and building our story towards government. So sometimes there's also, I know that there's a lot of funding available for SMEs, but sometimes the road to get there is a little bit too complex and a little too slow and maybe too much effort to really build on this. This is what we experience.
It's a clear message when we hear echoed from a lot of SMEs that think in the paper and pulp industry and across other industries. So a call to policymakers there. Make it simpler, make it easier.
Yeah.
That way you'll create more innovation. Well, I want to bring you in now, Maria, as well. I'm sure you've got examples of the industries that you've worked with where, again, values being created through changing and evolving business models via innovations. We'd also like to hear your expertise and your perspective on the whole. What Julie touched upon from the European Spinning Group, the idea of moving from a more product-driven to a more solution or consumer-driven model of business. Over to you.
Thank you. Indeed, that's absolutely the trend we are seeing across the B2B sector, B2B industries we work with. And just to start with, let me share a few numbers with you. So based on our Gallup global research, we know that 29% of B2B customers across the globe tend to be engaged with their B2B providers or with their supplier. And engagement is the term we at Gallup use to capture the strength of partnership. So engaged partner or engaged consumer would be someone who has real trust, real sense of loyalty, and is willing to take risks to make the partnership succeed. So that's what we call engagement. And 29% of customers in B2B world are engaged, meaning 70% are not, right? And those 70%, our research shows that these are the customers that are willing to switch providers at the next marginally interesting opportunity. So be it price, be it more convenience, but they just need a little nudge or a little push and they will be gone. So basically those 70% are at risk. And then another research point is 30% of B2B customers say that their supplier understands their needs. So only 30%. And this is kind of a backdrop of the innovation environment we're talking about. So Julie was talking a lot about working together with customer, co-creating. And a lot of companies today have a problem with actually listening to customer, understanding their needs. And we totally, from our experience, totally agree that the best innovations come from that co-creation and listening to the customer. So really our first piece of advice when we think about innovation, especially powering commercial growth from innovation, is to focus on that customer intelligence piece. A lot of companies tend to think about benchmarking themselves against competitors, so using customer satisfaction metrics, using NPS scores. Well, this is all nice and good, but it doesn't really help understand what customer need is. How would you hear about the tender that your customer is applying for, announced by the Dutch Army, for example? You have to have that line of communication open. It has to be done in a structured, systemic way. And this is definitely the area of opportunity we see specifically working with paper and pulp industry. And our experience comes mostly from Americas and a little bit of Asia, so we work less in Europe, so just a caveat there. And what we see from our understanding of the industry is that indeed a lot of customers of paper and pulp industries tend to struggle with their suppliers understanding the need. And indeed, when we even compare those indicators to some of the competitors, let's say plastic packaging, that plastic packaging industry is often seen by the customers as more open for close strategic partnership and co-innovation, co-creation. And I think this is their opportunity paper and pulp industry can definitely embrace. So if you look to create that customer intelligence model, what you're looking to do is to really make sure it's structured, so it's not happening ad hoc. So I listen to the customer only when I feel like that, or only when there is a good opportunity. It has to be a structured, systemic process. And also, we have to be really careful. We need to capture complexity of the customer buying center, because more and more what we are hearing right now is that those buying centers become very cross-functional. So there is no one person who decides who my supplier is going to be. There are many people, many stakeholders with different interests and different agendas. So understanding that and capturing it is really important. In most cases, you can't capture it with just one number. So now, in terms of learnings, what we've learned from partnering with companies in the industry in other regions of the world. So what brings success is focus on the full value chain, not just on our customer, but also on our customer's customer, and really tracing that path of our contribution to the end consumer, really focusing on the solution rather than just kind of on the product. And the data and analytics is the resource that every company today has and can embrace and can harness. The good thing about it is that data for most of the companies is almost for free. It's just we need the capability to be able to analyze it and utilize it. So our advice here is not trying to boil the ocean, but to find a niche where you can apply your data, your understanding of the market, to bring that unique, tailored insight that your B2B consumer will value. And that insight, of course, has to be then tailored to the very end customer solution. To be a bit more specific here, one example from a paper packaging company we worked with in Americas, and the challenge that the company has is one of their biggest their biggest customers, fast food chain, looked into opening a delivery business, so delivery of fast food products. And of course, all of their competitors of our clients were interested in being part of that new delivery business and offering. They more or less had the same idea of innovation, how we can help you innovate with the packaging so that the food will be delivered in a best condition possible. And the challenge organization faced is how do we differentiate ourselves from all these competitors? How can we provide that unique value? And what we've done together is created a data-powered model where we looked into different data sources, population growth, socioeconomic data, geospatial data, even some indicators of well-being, population growth, so all mobile app behavior, and very different sources. And based on that, we were able to identify just a few markets where it made sense for the fast food company to launch their delivery business. And based on that, we knew that. So the criteria we used to identify those places were the growing demand, and second, the highest existing dissatisfaction with the quality of packaging of the existing delivery services. So when the organization came to their fast food chain customer, they were not only able to say we can help you innovate and power your delivery business. We know exactly where you should start, this is why, and our product will be a source of your competitive advantage. And by the way, we already thought how we can shift our production capabilities to meet your demand. We already thought how we will shift our account teams to be able to serve you better.
Anyway, I'll come in there. So let's imagine there'll be some people in this audience. I'm a company. I'm interested in seizing the opportunity that you've identified. A little bit like we heard from Julie before, moving from a more transactional, product-based to a more strategic, consumer needs-based model of business. What, in simple terms, is my 1, 2, 3 of my first steps? What have I got to do?
Yeah. I think if you are small or medium-sized company, probably the number one thing to do is to have a conversation with the customer. I think that the smaller the business is, the easier it is. So it's really having that ongoing conversation with the customer. The larger the business is, the more challenging it becomes. And really that listening capability or customer listening capability is the one area I think organizations really need to invest. Because often what we see, especially when we work with larger companies, sometimes the customer intelligence they get is based on web survey, on one number, be it NPS, customer satisfaction. And it's just not enough to capture the whole complexity of what's going on with the customer and complexity of the buying center. So having a very structured approach, which would include quantitative measures, but also very kind of old-fashioned qualitative insights, conversations with the appropriate stakeholders at your customer on an ongoing basis. I would say that's the number one
That's the number one thing. Thanks very much, Maria. It's an interesting insight from everyone. Right, we've got 2 jobs to do now to move on with the panel. First of all, I'll invite you, Lena, Martin, Julie, if you want to reflect on anything you've heard so far. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, I totally agree on how you have to have a debate with your, or contact with your customer and customer's customer. And it's always, why is it that a very nice piece of meat with all the eco-labeling in the world, doubling 3, 4 maybe marks, is sold in a oil-based package? I think that is really some sort of
contradiction in terms, in a sense.
Yeah.
Very much.
So sometimes you also have to ask the right questions.
I'm with you.
Or
Please, Julie.
or maybe educate the markets. Excuse me. This is actually what we're feeling with the circular economy. I understand indeed your point about microplastics, because polyester is still the biggest textile fabric that is being used. But as long as either governments or consumers are not giving the good example of, I'm not claiming that we should stop buying polyester fabrics, but should start buying.
I can do that.
Yes. Then the industry will not follow, because we still need the full supply chain to work and to add value to
But
it.
public procurement, as you mentioned, is a very powerful tool.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to add exactly that point. Gunter Pauli made those points, and I think it's an under-leveraged public policy tool, particularly to try and create lead markets, not to solve the whole problem, but to pull early to sort of mid-stage innovations through to the scale where they become better known. You can test standards and performance that is otherwise not confirmed through real-life experience. And obviously they create an expectation that it will scale further. So we need to think through more how we better do that at European level. It's not just the EU institutions. Public procurement represents a large part of EU GDP, 15, 20%, something like that. But it's very, very dispersed, disaggregated across many levels of government. And the challenge is how to do that at scale when it is so disaggregated. But we should certainly do more of that.
I think a good thing as well is that it's nice to see that in this eco-fashion or eco-paper or whatever, you see new startups and startup initiatives of young people believing in this, ecology story, and this is really a big driver for the industry as well. And this is really something that I believe that where SMEs can play a big role is giving these startups kind of the knowledge of the industry that maybe they're lacking. So those two drivers working together, I think that's also a very strong driver for this kind of innovation.
And I also think what we should think about in the sector with all, because we have a number of very big companies, and if we could work a little bit more the American or the Californian way, that the patents that you don't use, outsource them to and create your own cluster around you, and also be nice with the first customer. Maybe for a startup, it's extremely valuable to have an experienced person on board, or as a mentor or something. And I think our big companies in this sector are not enough open to these working methods.
That's what I feel indeed, and that's what I was saying. You hear all this corporate venturing of large industry players who have the knowledge, who are then investing also in smaller businesses to gain the knowledge for their own innovation potential. I think this has a huge potential.
A huge potential too. Right, ladies and gentlemen, everybody in this room, stand up, please. You two panel, stand up. It's 5 o'clock. It's that time of the day, we all know, but we get tired. Frankly, I'm 44, just. I've got 2 small kids, like I told you. I get a bit tired at 5 o'clock myself. You've got 2 choices. Okay? I believe in democracy. Of course, under the umbrella of my own dictatorship, naturally. So, 2 choices. Choice number 1 is to jump up and down on the spot, please. Choice number 2 is any exercise of your own you prefer that doesn't just involve moving your facial muscles. It does not involve causing injury to anyone around you. Okay? Go! Go! Come on, don't show! Come on! I'm going to do it too. Right. Thank you very much. That's enough. Sit down. Right. Now, we've heard from our panel, ladies and gentlemen. We've got the blood going again. The last bit of lunch really gets you, doesn't it? I'd like now to call upon someone who's been curiously working away in the corner, our cartoonist, and I want to collect what he's captured from what we've heard from Sylvain and what we've also heard from our panel. So, what have you got for us? Oh, that's the back of my head on the screen. I don't know. What a very unflattering shot of my bald patch. Right, can we have the cartoons on both screens, please? Technical guys at the back, thank you. Yeah, there's a good point, as Silver mentioned. There'll be roadblocks on our roadmap, ladies and gentlemen. It won't be an ATV path, but at the same time, we've got to do it. What else have you got for us, Mikel? Transformation can indeed bring tangible, lasting value for the paper and pulp industry. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's our next innovation, to make money grow on trees. This is linking what we heard from the panel, particularly from Maria from Ghana. Don't benchmark yourself as a company or against your competitors, but listen to your customers and your customers' customers to help drive value through innovation. And have you got one more for us as well? Thank you. Yes, I know I'm messing up, but according to Maria from Ghana, 30%, only 30% of B2B customers actually feel like the supplier really understands their needs. So I think there's a learning in there we can all take away. Right now, there's our cartoons. Let's give them a round of applause, man. Well, my knees are not as good as they used to be now. Right now, I think it's over to you. We've heard from our panel. You as an audience now, I think it's your turn. We've got expertise here in terms of leveraging on what customers need. We've got the SME perspective. We've got the policy perspective. We've got a European perspective. We've got a climate perspective. Have you got any questions for them? Now, usually when we ask about innovation, someone taking that first step forward, everyone goes, well, yeah, okay. I'll wait. I'll see what the others do and I'll follow. Don't be that person. Get your hand up. Yes, please.
Because I'm the oldest here, I start.
Can we? And he's got a box for you. It's an innovative tool.
Thank you very much. Because I'm the oldest, I start off your circulation training.
Thank you very much.
Speaking about innovation, I only want to give one aspect, and I think you said that it is very important to hire young people. I'm coming from a middle-sized paper company, and we are producing since a short time paper of grass instead of wood pulp. And that idea comes from young people, not from me, not from those. And our old engineers rejected to do it. And I tell you a story which happened in Germany, which is the press a sad story about BMW. Young students at the Munich University, Technical University, they developed innovation for electromobility, a very important development. They went to BMW, and BMW is also not easy. And they didn't even get a date with the decision makers. And then they called Tesla, and now they're working for Tesla. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience want to take the box? Come on, don't be shy.
I can give it to you, the box.
You're going to hand delivered by CEO. Who's next with a question for our panel? Anyone?
Maybe the next oldest one.
Next oldest person in the room stands up, please. Let's say this is
Who's the youngest one?
Or it could be the youngest.
Or the youngest.
I'm probably the next oldest one.
But you're not the next oldest one. I know his age. He's still a young guy.
I think I probably am. I was a bit saddened to hear about the fact that there's only 30% of SMEs who talk to their customers.
Oh, that's how it works.
I see. Yeah, this is what happens.
Not every innovation is immediately understood.
Yeah.
You're too young.
But I'll make one point. Don't write off the industry just yet. There is a project which Sylvain mentioned, which is this DES project. The wonderful thing about it is it's shared IP between 21 companies. They have shared their IP and they're still sharing it after 4 years. There's a real benefit in that, and I think that we're a bit quick to criticize and say, well, it doesn't happen. It does happen. We just need to look.
Next oldest?
Otherwise, I'll name you.
Hold on, I think one of our panelists want to come in. Marie, you want to mention something about that?
Yeah, just a quick comment on this one. We often find in our B2B studies that IP, securing one's IP can be a real barrier for trustful partnership across the value chain. So that's definitely one of the areas how you can innovate and tackle it. So kudos to you for doing that.
Okay, well, I challenge you, ladies and gentlemen. You've got two choices. Number one, have a think about those questions you might want to ask now, and don't be shy. Or number two, I will make you stand up again, and I will make you exercise. You choose. I'm going to count to 5. If I'm not satisfied, I'm going to take action. 1, 2, 3. You tested me, huh? 4. Thank you. Always works. Soundbox in the back there, please.
Soundbox, coming.
Okay, thank you everybody. So I'm saving me from exercise, I have to do it. Well, lots of things I actually want to ask and talk about, but one thing I think is really interesting is the notion. Well, one thing I always had, this is a comment really about innovation, working from a slightly different industry, is that I think that we're very, very fast to talk about innovation, but actually a lot of innovation is just good ideas, because until it actually hits the marketplace and makes change, that's when it can be called real innovation. And there are very, very few innovations that that really made great change. And of course, we've got so many different now paradigms, so many different things that we have to look at that are changing in the next 50 years. that actually, to us, now is a great time for innovation. The big problem we have, which was really interesting to hear from you guys, was about the need for pre-commercialisation and to be able to get funding and to be able to get that side of things sorted. So my comment really is I hope that the governments and the policies start to look towards pre-commercialisation as much as they're looking towards funding innovation.
Thanks very much. In fact, I'll place that back to the panel. We've heard talk today about the need to go from lab to plant to market. To take ideas, as you mentioned over here, I think quite succinctly, ideas about innovation and actually make them commercialised and actually really bring them forward to the market. Any reflections from our panel about how we can do that better? How any policy can do that better? And what we need to do that better?
Well, there is, in all innovation talks, there's always mentioning of the Death Valley in between laboratory and industry. And it's very sad because I think there are a lot of good ideas that could have been put on the market with a win-win situation both for economy and jobs and environment. So, I think I see a sort of reorientation when you put up these systems. If you look at how the government thinks, there are more programs on how to find methods to bridge the valley of death for ideas, and it's part also of what the Commission discusses. At the same time, I think we have to. That is an area where we ourselves can cooperate more. Actually, on demo, smaller facilities where we can test our products, I would also like to mention one thing, and one material testing facility that is being built right now in Lund, European Spallation Source, where you could use neutron bombing. It sounds very violent. It's not. It's not, because
the positive vibes in the paper industry as well, share the positive stories in the paper industry, in the textile industry, to show that indeed companies are working on these things, and the negative feeling and vibe around or across these traditional sectors.
Thanks very much. But I'm going to bring this panel to a conclusion now with some final comments as time is passing. And we're approaching our finish time for the day. So I'll ask each of you as a panelist, maybe our concept here was how can industry capture lasting value through innovation. We've given examples, we've heard examples of that type of value, but we've also heard about innovation has to go from lab across this valley of death to the plant and to the market as well. On this theme of how can we capture this value through innovation, I'll ask each of you to give us a concluding sentence or two. If you've got one message or one reflection you'd like to share with our audience and wider audience on the theme of moving forward to do this value from innovation, what would it be? Martin, I'll start off with you. What would be your concluding line?
Well, one issue we haven't really touched on yet, which I think is essential if you are to capture long-lasting and durable value, is to be sure that the innovations overall are sustainable. And that sounds very easy to say, but biomass is likely to be in much greater demand in due course, and if we trade off, if you want, that production at the expense of other issues, then there will be problems. We've learned the hard way through biofuels that we need to be very attentive, if you want, to the wider picture. So real lasting value needs to take that into account, as well as all of the other issues that we've already mentioned.
Yeah. So that lasting value is built on sustainability, but the interconnectivity you mentioned earlier. Lena?
Well, I always say that forestry in our sector has a triple offer. The first one is, of course, jobs and economy. The second one is the unique possibility to take down CO2 from the atmosphere. Regulation and new standards and technology will not be enough. Time is shortening, the problem is getting worse. So what we need is really more live and kicking trees, actively taking down CO2. That is, of course, a great offer to an answer to one global challenge. But that's not enough, because all trees, when they deteriorate, becomes methane, which is 20 times as difficult. So you should use biodiversity is, don't get me wrong, is very good. We should protect rainforest, but in all the areas where trees have been cut down or we have a lot of erosion, we should plant trees, plant trees, plant trees, plant trees, plant trees. So that is the second offer. The third offer is substitution, because we need to defossilize the world, meaning changing the basis for a number of products from oil to biodegradable sources. Forestry is of course a major one when the forests are run sustainably, which is a precondition. I look at Martin, he looks very sort of, well, so substitution, and I think there will be a lot of pull factors in the markets for such products that substitute oil as a base. Textile is one, and I applaud your efforts. I think it's very smart.
Thanks, Lena, for your 1, 2, 3. So, Julie, on to you then. What would be your takeaway?
I think really to make innovation work in an SME, I think you need two things. First of all, I already mentioned it. Have good building blocks means have agile machinery, agile production processes, which are important, agile teams to work with. And I think the second point is really create kind of a philosophy or culture of openness. Actually, everyone in the company should be able to bring ideas, to listen to customers, to suppliers, to I don't know, the news, to Mr. Pauly with some really disruptive innovations. But everyone should bring this kind of ideas to the company. If you create kind of a philosophy, then it will work, I guess.
It permeates from top to down and from down to top. With Fanny Maria, to finish us off, what would be your concluding comments?
Yes, I would say that often we see that companies, especially mature companies, struggle with finding that balance between innovation and powering growth through innovation and cutting and controlling costs. And sometimes almost like a cycle where companies swing in one direction and there is not enough to go into innovation pipeline, or we go into innovation pipeline and then costs go out of control. And it's similar to the challenge people had a lot of years ago when, the challenge between having windows in your house. Do you have large windows, so you have a lot of light, but then it gets cold in winter, or do you have small windows so you don't get enough light, but it's warm? And then people invented glass. And our suggestion is to think about customer benefit, customer need as that glass that helps you to find the compass, which innovation is the right one, where should I invest, and if that's the innovation which will really help to benefit the customer will be willing to pay for that, be it a more sustainable product, be it more value-add solution advice, more data-heavy, customized approach. So if it's benefiting your customer, you would not be stuck in a commodity market.
Thanks very much. So with those concluding comments, ladies and gentlemen, we'll bring our panel to a close. But ask for a final round of applause for our panelists, Lena,